All right, ready to dive in. Today we're talking about something pretty important.
Yeah, something you use every single day.
Your brain. Specifically, all the fascinating things we can learn from Dr. Daniel Amen and his work.
You're talking about that interview he did on the Diary of a CEO YouTube channel, right?
Exactly. That's our source material for this deep dive.
Well, what struck me was how many brains he scanned. Like, it's unbelievable.
Over 250,000, it's kind of mind-blowing.
And he says he can spot signs of all sorts of things just from those scans.
ADHD, past trauma, you name it. He even shows Stephen Bartlett, the interviewer, his own brain scan.
I know, that was really interesting to see.
Makes you wonder what your scan would look like, doesn't it?
Wait.
But it can't be that simple, right? Like, just look at a picture and boom, you have a diagnosis.
Well, it's definitely not that straightforward. Brain scans can reveal patterns and differences, sure.
But they're not like a crystal ball.
Exactly. Think of it like looking at a city's traffic from a helicopter. You can see where things are flowing and where there might be issues.
But you wouldn't diagnose a problem with someone's car just from that view, would you?
Nope. You need the whole picture, the car's history, the driver's behavior, all of it. Same with the brain.
So the scan is just one piece of the puzzle. You need someone's symptoms, their background, the whole story.
Exactly. And that's where Dr. Amen's Bright Minds program comes in.
Yes. He talks about those 11 risk factors that can impact brain health.
Right. Things that can really affect how your brain functions. I think it's worth exploring a few of those.
Definitely. What are some of the big ones that stand out to you?
Well, one Dr. Amen really hammers home is sugar. He even calls it brain poison.
Wow, that's intense. But I mean, we all know sugar isn't exactly health food.
He's not just talking about weight gain here. He's observed that sugar can trigger inflammation in the brain.
And inflammation is never good, wherever it is.
It's like a fire in your brain. It can mess with your focus, your memory, even your mood.
Makes you think twice about that afternoon soda.
It really does. And then there's sleep, which, let's be honest, most of us don't get enough of.
Oh, tell me about it. I'm always running on fumes. But how does lack of sleep affect the brain specifically?
Dr. Amen compares a sleep-deprived brain to driving with the parking brake on.
Ouch. That's a powerful image.
Your brain is sluggish. It can't function at its best. It's like trying to think through a fog.
He makes a good point. Sleep is definitely something we need to prioritize. What about ADHD? I've always struggled with focus myself, and I'm curious what he has to say about it.
Well, one of his main arguments is that ADHD is a brain disorder, not a lack of willpower.
Interesting. So it's not just about trying harder to focus.
He believes it has a lot to do with how the brain is wired. And while medication can be a tool for some people...
He doesn't think it's the only answer.
Right. He emphasizes lifestyle changes, too. Things like finding work you're actually passionate about.
Because if you're genuinely engaged, your brain is naturally more focused.
Exactly. He even talks about how trauma can leave a mark on the brain.
Trauma? Wow, I didn't expect that to come up.
He thinks of it like a dent in a car. Those dents can affect how you react to stress, how you form memories.
Even your emotions.
Absolutely. It's all connected. This deep dive is really eye-opening, isn't it?
It really is. I'm starting to see how everything is linked. What we eat, how we sleep, even our past experiences.
It all plays a part in shaping our brain health. Welcome back. We're still exploring all these brain health ideas with Dr. Amen.
You know, I gotta say, this is making me realize how much I've neglected my own brain.
It's like, I knew it was important, but I haven't really given it much thought.
It's easy to focus on our physical health, eating right and exercising.
Yeah, but brain health is just as important, maybe even more so.
Absolutely. Dr. Amen certainly makes a strong case for that.
So, picking up where we left off, he had some really interesting things to say about toxins.
Toxins? Like what kind of toxins?
Well, he's not just talking about drugs and alcohol, although those are obviously harmful.
Of course, but what else?
He's talking about everyday things we might not even consider. Products in our homes, personal care items.
Like what, shampoo and cleaning supply?
Yeah, things like that. He even mentioned anesthesia as a potential toxin, which I found surprising.
Wow, I never thought of that.
Yeah.
I guess it makes sense, though. Anything that affects our bodies can affect our brains.
Exactly. He recommends using an app called Think Dirty to check the toxicity of products.
I've heard of that. I might have to check it out. So, toxins. What else is on the list of brain busters?
Well, this one's a bit of a mouthful, neurohormone imbalances. Basically, it means our hormones are out of whack.
Hormones, huh? I know they're important for our bodies, but how do they affect our brains?
Big time. They play a huge role in brain function. When they're off balance, it can cause all sorts of issues.
Like what? Give me an example.
He mentioned thyroid dysfunction as a potential culprit for mood disorders like depression.
Oh, interesting. I never made that connection before.
It's all connected, you see. Our endocrine system, which regulates hormones, is tied to brain health.
So it's important to get those hormone levels checked if something feels off.
Absolutely. And then there's the big one, what he calls diabesity. I love that term.
Diabesity. It sounds kind of scary. What exactly does that mean?
Basically, it's the combined impact of diabetes and obesity on brain health.
Oh, okay. So it's about maintaining a healthy weight. That's not just for our bodies, but for our brains, too.
Exactly. High blood sugar, excess weight, they can really mess with how our brains function.
Okay, so we've got toxins, hormones, and diabesity. This is a lot to keep track of.
It is. But remember, knowledge is power. Once we're aware of these things, we can start making changes.
All right, so what else did Dr. Amen talk about? Any other big takeaways?
Well, one that really fascinated me was his discussion of heart rate variability, or HRV.
I've heard of that, but I'm not exactly sure what it means.
Think of your heart beating like an orchestra, with slight variations in tempo. That's good HRV.
So it's like a well-rehearsed orchestra. Everything's flowing smoothly.
Exactly. It means your nervous system is adaptable, resilient, but a heart beating like a stressed out drummer all over the place, that's poor HRV.
Okay, so steady and adaptable is good. Got it.
Right. Higher HRV is linked to better stress management, emotional regulation, even sharper thinking.
Wow, so it really does affect everything.
Dr. Amen even quit drinking alcohol because he noticed it was messing with his HRV.
He's serious about this stuff.
Yeah.
What can we do to improve our HRV?
Well, he recommends things like regular exercise, stress reduction techniques, getting enough sleep.
So basically, all the things we should be doing anyway.
It all ties together, doesn't it? And he also talks about having a positive mindset. He uses this analogy of building positive highways in your brain.
Positive highways. I like that.
The more you engage in positive thoughts and behaviors, the stronger those neural pathways become.
So it's like you're literally training your brain to be more positive.
Exactly. And speaking of training, he had some interesting thoughts on ADHD too.
Yeah, that's something I'm really curious about.
He believes it's a brain disorder, not just a lack of willpower. Medication can help some people.
But it's not a cure-all.
Right. He's a big proponent of finding work that aligns with your passions, especially for people with ADHD.
Because when you're engaged in something you love, your brain is naturally more focused.
Exactly. And he's a big advocate for brain imaging, specifically SPECT scans.
What are SPECTs?
They measure blood flow and activity in the brain. He believes they can give you insights you wouldn't get from other assessments.
It's amazing how technology is playing a role in understanding brain health.
It is. But even with those tools, there's still so much we don't know. That's where brain reserve comes in.
Brain reserve? What's that?
It's your brain's ability to bounce back from challenges like aging or even head trauma.
So how do we build up our brain reserve? Is it like building muscle?
It's a great analogy. He stresses mental stimulation, learning new skills, challenging your brain with puzzles, things like that.
So it's not just about protecting our brains from damage, but also about making them stronger.
Exactly. And this connects to what he said about trauma.
Trauma can affect brain reserve.
He believes it can have a lasting impact, affecting areas like the amygdala and hippocampus.
Those are the parts of the brain involved in fear and memory, right?
You got it. He's a big fan of trauma-informed therapies like EMDR, which can help process those traumatic memories.
Wow, it's amazing how everything we've talked about is so interconnected.
It really is, and that leads to one of his most insightful observations. Happiness is a skill we can cultivate.
Happiness is a skill. That's an interesting way to think about it.
He encourages us to be intentional about our happiness, to focus on the positive, practice gratitude.
So it's not just about waiting for good things to happen, but actively creating them?
Exactly.
Yeah.
He even goes as far as to say happiness is a moral obligation.
A moral obligation. That's a bold statement.
He believes our emotional state affects not just us, but also those around us.
So it's about creating a ripple effect of positivity.
Absolutely. And that's a great place to pause for now.
I can't believe how much we've covered already. But there's still more to come, right?
That's right. We'll be back soon to dive into some more fascinating insights from Dr. Amen.
All right, we're back and ready to wrap up our brain health deep dive. I'm telling you, this has been a real eye-opener.
It's amazing how much we can learn about ourselves just by exploring the brain, right?
Totally. So before we finish, I'm really curious about those differences between male and female brains that Dr. Amen mentioned.
Oh, he definitely had a lot to say about that.
Yeah, he seemed pretty convinced that they're wired differently. And he even had brain scans to support his claims.
He did. He talked about that big study he did.
Over 46,000 brain scans, wasn't it?
Something like that. And the differences in blood flow and activity patterns were pretty striking.
Like what kind of differences? Give me an example.
Well, he found that women tend to have better blood flow to the prefrontal cortex.
The prefrontal cortex, remind me what that does again.
It's the part of the brain that handles planning, decision-making, impulse control, all that good stuff.
So he's saying women are better at those things.
He seems to think so. He linked it to women's ability to multitask, communicate, collaborate.
Interesting. Any other differences he observed?
Yeah, he found that women's limbic systems tend to be more active.
The limbic system,
Yeah.
that's the emotional center.
Exactly. So he thinks this might explain why women are generally more empathetic and intuitive.
That makes sense, but isn't that part of the brain also linked to things like anxiety and depression?
You're catching on. He actually argues that increased activity in the limbic system might make women more vulnerable to those conditions.
And statistically, women are twice as likely as men to suffer from depression, right?
That's what the research shows.
So he's saying there might be a biological basis for that difference. It's a lot to think about.
It is. Of course, it's important to remember these are generalizations, not hard and fast rules.
Of course, every brain is unique. But this whole conversation just highlights how much we don't know about the brain.
There's always more to discover. But even with what we do know, there's so much we can do to optimize our brain health.
That's what's so exciting. It's not like we're just stuck with the brain we were born with.
Exactly. We have the power to shape and influence it. And Dr. Amen really encourages us to be intentional about that.
Oh yeah, he talked about having a life plan.
Like a business plan, but for your life. Setting goals, making sure your actions align with those goals.
I like that idea. It gives you a sense of direction, you know?
It's about taking control, making conscious choices that support your well-being.
This whole deep dive has been so empowering, honestly. It's like, okay, I have more control over my brain health than I thought.
And that's what we hope you take away from this, listener. You're not just a passenger in your own brain.
You're the driver, and you can choose where you want to go. Even small changes can make a big difference.
Whether it's trying that Think Dirty app, starting a gratitude journal, getting more sleep, those things add up.
And as Dr. Amen said, happiness is a skill. It's something we can cultivate, something we can practice.
So go out there, nourish your brain, challenge it, unlock its potential.
Thanks for joining us on this brain health journey. It's been a fascinating ride.
Until next time, keep diving deep and keep